Thank you, Emily. I would like to encourage a shift in thinking. That's a big generational shift for UU communities. And that is, UUs have traditionally seen themselves, especially in the Southeast, as a refuge from the political and religious oppressions of the larger society. And the UU community was considered to be a place where one could go and talk about things that were anathema other places. Ideas that might seem radical to other groups, but were safe within a UU setting. And that is very valuable. But I would like to encourage, and I do encourage, a shift in thinking where Unitarian Universalists see themselves increasingly as a place that's not simply a refuge, although that will never go away totally, but as a place that provides vital value and guidance to society and culture, to people, to ordinary people, to every spectrum, every economic group, every spectrum of society. We, right now, as a religious movement, through decades of toil, have created a message which the world needs now. And you need to look no further than our principles as a religious movement. One area in which we offer important value is encouraging people to grasp, understand, take in, and integrate into their lives this concept of the worth and dignity of all persons. It is our first principle. And it is relevant today because, like few other times, right now, the worth and dignity of persons is under severe stress and strain. And I'd like to talk about three reasons I believe that is true. And the first reason has to do with what the futurist Alan Toffler in 1970 called future shock. And future shock, he described, is the pace of change, and change which is significant and impactful. And he predicted in 1970 that we would reach a time as a society when the pace of change and the significance of those changes, the impactfulness of those changes, would begin to overwhelm people. And I believe that we are at that point right now. Let me show you a couple of reasons why I think that. Could you cue the first picture? Here is a graph of human population. So it goes back to 8,000, 10,000 before Christ, and you see how flat the line was until right before 2021, and then it skyrockets. Well, I love people. The more people, the better. Perhaps UUs can get a share of that huge number of people. But that increase in population means dislocations. It means that there might be groups of people who, because of climate change or any number of reasons, find it necessary to migrate to other countries, and that creates frictions and so forth. That creates stress. Could you show the second slide at this point? This is the pace of technological advancement. And it stops, as you'll see, it stops at the top in 1990 with mobile phone technology. But you would agree with me, I think, that over the last 10 or 20 years, we've experienced a phenomenal amount of technological change. Let me show you the example with this next slide of one example of that. This is a robot that was recently created, and notice please the face, and that the face is able to mimic what we would consider to be human-like characteristics. You might be looking at a prototype of your next settled minister. I don't know. Look at that. I can see he would just scoop up all the sermons on the internet from UU ministers. He would say to everybody in the congregation, "What would you like to hear about today?" And put a robe on that guy and you're off to the races. Now, why is this significant? Because it's all change. What is that robot going to do? How many jobs might they take over in the future? That will be disruptive. And the reality is, people don't like change. Let me give you an example. Wonder if after today, after the service, everybody was gone, and one person came back and they felt inspired by the universe, and they came in here and took this piano and moved it to over here. Well, if everybody came in next week, there would be riots in the foyer. There would be people debating, why did you do, who did that? How dare they do that? And on and on. And do you see how small a change that is? But we are immersed in a sea of change that is so total that we have no longer been able to see it. Occasionally it manifests itself in certain ways. It shows up in a virus, and then we have to adapt. The arrangement that we have here, that we're practicing right here, the technological sophistication of this service did not exist for this congregation a year ago. We had to adapt. And when we adapt, there were some stresses and strains to that. Second, the second disruptor affecting people's sense of their worth and dignity is the power of social media. Within the last year, on several occasions, I've observed my youngest daughter taking a picture of her food. I said, "Why are you taking a picture of your food? Why would anybody do that? I mean, you're about to eat, sit down and eat it." And this didn't happen once, not twice, but about 3 times in different settings. Why would you do that? She said, "I'm posting it on Instagram." I said, "Why would you post on social media what the meal is?" "Well, it looks interesting, it's attractive, it's just..." So clearly I was outside a world that my daughters were increasingly inhabiting. Now, in people over 65, 37% use Facebook. 26% use Instagram. Now, I'm not there yet. I hardly look at Facebook, but there's a lot of people using it. Now, for people who are 30 to 49, this is a critical bit of information. People from 30 to 49, 40% of them now use social media as their primary news source. In the group of people, let's skip over the middle-aged and go to younger people, 25 to 29, 20% use Snapchat, 34% use Instagram, 83% use Facebook, 35% use Twitter. That group of people are immersed in the social media world. In the 18 to 24 age bracket, 42% use Snapchat, 51% use Instagram, 83% uses Facebook. Facebook is still strong. 43%, a bump up, uses Twitter. Now, what is really incredible about these numbers is the percentage of people who use social media to get their news source. Remember back in the dark ages when Walter Cronkite and other people would be the focus for society's understanding of what the news is? That's been blown apart. Now, I read a report this week, and I don't know how widespread or valid this is, but this came from a reputable organization, that there is a crisis regarding depression among the young. And one of the sources of that is that social media was engaging people endlessly in the effort to compare themselves with other people. So that, and I know this is true through my daughter's experience, I know that the royal road to misery is to engage in comparison with other people, to see other people as better than oneself or more comfortable or whatever. It is the road to misery, and yet so much of social media is all about comparing one's life with others. And the people who are at the king of the top of this pyramid are the people who have millions of followers and of course have this glamorous life they project, which is all, of course, utter nonsense. Disinformation, uninhibited hate speech has led, on social media, has led to an unparalleled polarization of people in our society, casting accusations and threats against one another without any filter. The Twitter world is like the Facebook world in that it allows people to cluster in groups and to confirm and reconfirm their views within their little circle and to talk about how bad and wicked the other group is. It's polarization. And the recent revelations about Facebook have shown that the people who are running Facebook like the polarization, like content that drives people towards polarities because it feeds the money machine that they've created. It's good business. It provokes interest to get people to hate and dislike other people. The passion involved in that increases profits. And that's the reality we're dealing with. Okay. The third attack on the individual and their significance and their worth and their value is the undermining of education. The teachers that I have always met throughout my career are the most wonderful people in society, dedicated. Teachers should be paid, should be among the highest paid professionals in our society. Do I hear an amen? I mean, think about it. We don't have a democracy if we don't have teachers. We don't have anybody in society who can think critically if we don't have teachers. We have a population, tens of millions of whom are willing and able to elect an unethical baboon for president if we have no educational system that's valued enough so that people are taught to think critically and to see fraud when they experience it, to understand it. Think about it. Okay, the point of all of this is that these forces are weakening the individual's capacity to think independently, to value themselves, and not to be addicted to some outer authority. The ability, I know from experience as a minister, the ability for people to stand on their own and to be true to themselves and to cultivate a sense of their own worth and what is important to them and to move toward that, that is very hard for people to do. To be a person in the real sense of the word is not easy. And of course, that is what we here are all about, helping people to be a genuine person in the full meaning of that word, helping young people to know what that means in the fullest meaning of the word. But it is a very fragile thing. It is not unlike a candle blowing in the wind. And so when you have strong social forces, whatever they might be derived from, that are blowing and blowing and blowing against that candle, it is easy for that candle to go out. Analyzing the problem, understanding the problem is important. I could have talked about racism, about white supremacy, about the vast disparities between the rich and the poor that you see especially in places like San Francisco, and other ways in which the human in our society is demeaned. Oh, they're encouraged to be narcissistic, to be selfish, to take a selfie, but to be a person, to be a real person, is something that is almost invisible in our society. So it is valuable to understand what we're dealing with, but it is more important to talk about a solution. And I am utterly convinced, totally and utterly convinced, that we as Unitarian Universalist movement supply right now the values, the beliefs, the understanding of the world that the world needs, that our culture needs. Because as a UU congregation, we are addressing the whole world and saying, whoever you are, whatever your circumstances, whatever your past, whatever your sexual orientation, whatever forms of identity you embrace, you are welcome to this community of persons engaged in a process of cultivating integrity, of cultivating wholeness and peace. You are invited to pursue a life of meaning and purpose for you, to cultivate wholesome relationships with others, and to engage with others in the healing and renewal of the world. That is what we are saying to the world, and it is very important. You are invited, we are saying, to disengage from the incessant whirl of meaningless action and chatter around us, to cultivate what it means to be human. And this is the invitation we extend to everyone without reservation. We have a way right here in our grasp, right here, you and I. We have a way to address a problem that is an epidemic. The problem is the loss of the self, of the individual, of the authentic self, and the individual's sense of their worth and dignity. There must be places in society, if society is to survive, there must be places where the worth, value, and dignity and importance of the individual is honored in a way that is healthy. We are one of those places. Carl Jung wrote, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." We don't want to be there. I have a soft spot in my heart towards the Danish people because my mother's mother was from Copenhagen, Denmark, and I have admired the Danes from afar, but they have a word. It's spelled Hygge. It's pronounced hygge. And in both Danish and Norwegian, hygge refers to, and I quote, a pleasant and highly valued everyday experience of safety, equality, personal wholeness, and a spontaneous social flow, creating a cozy and convivial atmosphere that promotes well-being. Blessed be the Danes. May we be a beehive of hygge. May it be so. And now the choir.